squatters and squatters' rights.
These people will come into your home and they know that the law is on their side.
You dropped so many truth bombs in this one.
We've got to quit coddling these kids. It's nuts.
Bad guys are using that knowledge of how the systems work against us.
Something that you say in this episode is so critical. The burden then falls on the children.
For you to come out and use your voice to expose this, it is doing our country a great service.
Well, it has been months since we launched Merit Street Media. And I want to thank everyone for watching and supporting us. And boy, have we been busy. We started this network because I believe that this country is in crisis and that the American family is under attack. I just couldn't stand by and watch anymore. I even wrote a book about it, my 10th book, actually. We've Got Issues, How All Americans Can Stand Strong for Our Country's Soul and Sanity. And all of you have made it the #1 selling book in America, so thank you for that. In this country, victimhood has replaced accountability. Hate and vitriol have become acceptable. We've become so divided that there is no longer any room for debate, no room for discussion. Never mind, we'll just agree to disagree. Criminals aren't being punished and oftentimes have more rights than law-abiding citizens. Our borders are being crossed illegally and the government is handing out free money to anyone with their hand out. We've been talking about all those topics and more, and I'm thrilled that these subjects matter to all of you as well. You've been vocal about expressing how these topics are resonating with you, and we're listening. Tonight, we're looking at some of the topics that really seem to strike a nerve. And to help me do that, I'd like to welcome from the morning on Merritt Street, Dominique Sachse. Come on out. And Fanchon Stinger. I'd also like to welcome our team from the news on Merritt Street, Loni Coombs, Kris Gutierrez, and Lyndsay Keith. Good to see you, good to see you. Let's all have a seat. Well, thank you all for being here.
Thanks for the invite.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Well,
We're thrilled.
so what's it been like for the first 7 months?
Exhilarating.
Yeah?
Like holding on to a missile. That's right.
Yeah. I'll bet that's right. So what's it been like in the evenings?
It's been great leading into you. That's been fun.
Yeah, well, it's been good to have a lead in. This is really new for you. You've been coming on Dr. Phil show for years.
Yes.
But now, Loni called me one day and said, okay, I understand you're going to Texas, but I'd still like to be involved in the show. And I said, well, if I got a deal for you.
Yes, it was a big surprise.
Yeah, so now it's every day, right?
It is. It's every day, and it's the news, and it's just amazing to be able to talk about what's going on in the world, looking for the truth that I always look for when I was talking on your show, but in the news, in the current events for everyone, so.
Yeah, she looks innocent, but she's a former prosecutor with the DA's office in LA. Kris has been a news anchor. You've been in news all your career, right?
25 years, yes, sir.
Yeah, 25 years.
And I grew up here in North Texas, so for Dr. Phil, and thank you. I'm a Louisville fighting farmer, and then I went to TCU. So there we go. And so for Dr. Phil and his team to build this in our backyard is a huge blessing and a huge opportunity that's not lost on anyone here, that's for sure.
Yeah, yep. And we pulled you up out of Houston, right?
You did. You plucked me out of the swamp, and I thank you for that.
Yeah.
You actually reunited me with Kris because
right.
he and I were both co-anchors at KPRC in Houston. So how cool to be able to share the same roof with him and to be introduced to this lovely woman who you put me with. So.
And you know, back in my litigation days, I defended KPRC frequently. Not because of you guys.
Not going to say a word.
Not because of you guys, but they were just a client of ours. Look, the first thing I want to discuss tonight is what's happening at our borders. We want to look at some of the shows that we've done, and I was shocked by what I was hearing. So I decided to head to the front line of the border crisis, Eagle Pass, Texas, where I asked some tough questions and got answers that shocked me, and I think it'll shock you. Let's take a quick look.
Smugglers cut through the border wall to sneak in migrants to the United States.
I'm standing at the border between Mexico and the United States. How under any theory is that okay for us to be spending tax dollars to traffic children?
Because the American people just don't know about it.
That's why I'm talking about it now. I want American people to know about this. This is really important with regard to the trafficking.
What I'm holding in my hand here today is America's new slave trade. The cartels can now go from the smuggling of people into the trafficking of people.
So what are they doing to pay this off?
This is where many of the women are going to go into commercial sex. This is where many of the men are going to become burglars, robbers, drug dealers. All of the things you and I have talked about, get ready. America's going to be stunned at what we've allowed here.
Well, Kris, this was an important topic. And
That's right.
You spent a lot of time down there.
My dad grew up in Mexico, right? And so the border issues have always been important to us. I think you hit it right on the head when you talk about you're not against immigration, and I don't think most Americans are against immigration, but you'd sure like to know who's in this country, right? And I think that's the problem. One of the things that I picked up when you were there was the difference between the way the state of Texas handles undocumented immigrants and the way our Border Patrol agents handle undocumented immigrants, right? And the bad guys are using that knowledge of how the systems work against us. And that's one thing that I thought you really brought to light in that episode. And I guess a question for you is, they did away with DNA testing, right? And you got kids coming to the border, they've got written on their T-shirt a name and a phone number, and how in the world are we able to clearly identify who that person is going to without us knowing? And then not only that, they're supposed to come back eventually for a court date, which could be months, years later.
Yeah. They're coming across and they've got numbers written on them.
Yes.
And we call that number, and if somebody answers, we ship that child off to them. And in many cases, they know that it is a prostitution ring. We're spending money to traffic these children into prostitution rings or sweatshops. True?
That's right. That's exactly right. And one of the things, too, that we highlighted, you can show maybe your audience remember that shoe?
Oh,
remember
I do.
showed you that? And so we have something called the gotaways, right, Dr. Phil? As you learned, those are people who the Border Patrol or someone doesn't catch. And what we're seeing now is the Border Patrol agents are seeing people, they'll put these things in the bottom of their shoes because...
Looks like a horse.
Looks like a hoof print. They'll use carpet, right?
Yeah.
Because the Border Patrol, they're assigned to cover this vast, wide open land, and they're literally tracking footprints. They don't know that it's a person sneaking in. They think that's a horse.
The other thing that got me was they know if they go to a brown uniform,
That's right.
they're going to get arrested and sent back. If they go to a green uniform, they get processed and get a court date, which may be 7 to 10 years later. Yeah. So they will run to a green uniform and hide from a brown uniform.
Right.
They are working the system.
Yeah. The brown uniform is the Texas State Troopers,
right,
and the green uniform is the Border Patrol.
Yeah, and we don't know who's coming in and who doesn't.
That's right.
It's stunning.
And Dr. Phil, it is a breath of fresh air that you're tackling this issue the way that you are, because there are journalists like myself who for years begged to try and uncover these stories. I did an in-depth investigation with cyber investigators, with border agents. The suicide rate with border agents is skyrocketing now. Also, we would go, a lot of us, to our local news organizations and say, hey, this is happening. Our children are being trafficked. We have proof of these things. Send me to the border. They would not, in many cases. So that is why we're getting the response from the crowd, like, wow, the gaps of surprise, because in many areas, we were silenced. And so for you to come out and use your voice to expose this, it is doing our country a great service where there has been a disconnect.
Yeah. I asked him, why are you not talking about this? And he said, nobody has asked me that question straight up like you're asking. And thank you for asking the question. Yes, we are paying money to send these children into a dark, dark place. All right, we got to take a break. Next, a mother who said she wore the label of hovering helicopter mom to her 13-year-old son as a badge of honor. Find out why I believe that mother was such a crucial teaching tool for the future of our country. That's after the break. Hey everybody, Dr. Phil here. Could the US dollar be on the precipice of collapse? 19% of Americans 65 and older are still working. That's double from 35 years ago. Some people say that's something our elected leaders should be fixing. So what do you do? Well, I can tell you what I'm doing. I'm turning to physical gold and silver, and I encourage you to do the same thing right now. Preserve Gold is the only company I trust and recommend to my own friends and family, and you can trust them too. Today, they're giving away a free precious metals guide that contains essential information on how to help protect your accounts. Just text Dr. Phil to 50505. As an exclusive offer for my friends, in addition to their free guide, you can also get up to $15,000 in free gold and silver with a qualified purchase. So don't wait. Text Dr. Phil, P-H-I-L, to 50505 to claim this exclusive offer from Preserve Gold today. When it comes to a generation of young adults, there is a great concern that many simply can't function in the real world due to being raised by overprotective and coddling parents. To address that very issue, I spoke with parents who made no apologies for overprotecting their children. And when I say helicopter mom, that's not a big enough word. Seriously, we got a generation of kids that are being way overprotected.
I'm a very proud helicopter mom. I'm gonna do it my way.
No sleepovers at friends' homes. You must keep his phone nearby and answer within 3 rings.
Don't you wish you had a mother like me? I mean, come on. He is balanced. He has confidence.
How do you know? You won't let him off the front porch.
He's 13.
The world's gonna eat this kid alive if you don't let him get some experience. Okay, Loni, I understand you have a lot to say about this.
Oh boy, do I. This episode is such a must-watch episode, and you dropped so many truth bombs in this one. Look, I know that families are really important to you. You wrote a book about it, Families First. You encouraged me to write a parenting book, which we entitled You're Perfect and Other Lies Parents Tell, The Ugly Truth About Spoiling Your Children. So you can see where we're coming from on this. You know, we talked about helicopter parenting. That term came into vogue about 10 years ago, and now we're seeing the effects of it. And you say you're raising adults, not kids. You're raising adults because you want them to be able to be successful and resilient and understand what it is to make it through a challenge and a failure so they can be successful out in the real world. These parents that you talk about on this show, that you talk with, are all about now, making sure that the child is perfectly happy, nothing ever goes wrong.
You know, I've said everything your child will ever be, they are now becoming. Mm-hmm. Because you're installing values, you're installing their resiliency, their toughness. Do you know that during COVID, one of the things that, I said a lot of things during COVID, and people thought I was a lunatic when I said it at first, that there were going to be more problems from the quarantine than from the virus itself. But one of the things during COVID is everybody went by wiping down surfaces with bleach and these disinfectant wipes. So much so that everybody's immune system got weaker because it wasn't doing battle every day. So then when everybody went back out into the world, we had a huge outbreak of colds and flu and all that. They said, oh, it's the worst colds season we've ever had. Yeah, no kidding. Because everybody's immune system got weak because it wasn't fighting off things. We were all bubble boys. Remember that movie, The Boy in the Bubble? Yeah. And that's what's happening socially. Every kid needs to be excluded some, fall and scrape their knee some, you know, be teased some. Because if they don't the first time it happens, they panic and go away. We've got to quit coddling these kids. It's nuts.
Yeah. Well, and they miss out on this opportunity to derive self-esteem from being able to make their own choices in life. And like you said, good, bad, or indifferent. Life is the greatest teacher there is.
And critical thinking.
Yes.
Teaching them to think critically about making decisions.
Oh, that
and
isn't
problem
even,
solving.
Different episode. Different episode.
But, you know, the way we use terms like self-esteem, but people don't understand how self-image and self-esteem actually takes place. It's just a term we use. But the way you form your self-image is by watching what you do. If you observe yourself overcome an obstacle, you attribute to yourself the competency to do that. But if your parents go knock that down for you, you don't know whether you could have done it or not.
Right. Yeah.
You know, something I've never forgotten, it's been probably 40 years ago. My mother lived next to a little girl, and my mother was out in the driveway one day, and this little girl came up and said, "I can zip, button, and tie." And she said, "You can zip, button, and tie?" And she said, "Really?" She said, "You want to show me?" She said, "Yeah." And she was showing her how she could zip something up, she could button her coat, and she could tie her shoes. And then she just said, "What do you think of that?" And she said, "Well, I'm just awful proud of you." And to me, that was such a pure example of kids overcoming this little small things, even at that age. All right, next, imagine going on vacation, coming home, finding people living in your house. But there is nothing the police can do about it, nothing you can do about it. Sounds crazy, right? Well, it's happening all over the country. It seems like these days, criminals have more rights than law-abiding citizens, and nowhere is this more apparent than with squatters and squatters' rights. And it seems like every day it's just getting worse. 16 million vacant homes, and 4.4 million of them are currently occupied by squatters.
Me and my girlfriend owns the house. If you I'm not touching you.
They physically assaulted me.
They were throwing feces at you.
The officer said, "I should arrest you because they have the right to privacy."
She hasn't paid rent in 18 months. We've offered her $25,000. She will not take it.
It's just unbelievable. Fanchon, you said until you watched this show, you had no idea squatters had rights. I think a lot of us got a wake-up call with this show.
I was shocked. You know, as a real estate investor, sometimes you think about squatters in terms of protecting your investment property so people can't get in and steal things out of it. Until I watched your show, I did not realize that this was such a pervasive problem when we talk about how many homes are vacant. And these squatters are brazen. I think that was the most surprising thing, Dr. Phillips, when you brought up the fact that these people will come into your home, they'll make changes, they'll destroy your home, and they know that the law is on their side. That, to me, was really eye-opening. And I think most people watching have probably never heard of a problem this significant when it comes to squatting.
Yeah. Patty, who you just saw, had this home for sale, and she, in fact, had it sold. And so she was just going over there to kind of make sure everything was okay. And these people had moved in, and they had a fake lease. She called the police, and they said, "Well, it's a civil matter. They've got a lease." The lease wasn't signed. They just made it up. So now you got to go to court and file eviction, and the court says, "Well, I can hear this in 4 months." They're living in the house. And then they have a sledgehammer party and knock all the walls down. Then they take all of the appliances and sell them on eBay. It cost $40,000 of damage that they did to that home while they were there. And the prosecutors did nothing to these squatters, and we raised hell about it. I mean, I was pretty hard on those prosecutors. Well, after the show aired, those prosecutors went and got those squatters and charged them. So they did charge them. And when she went in there, they had an itinerary for a vacation. They were going to the Bahamas.
Wow.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. They had $25 or $50 down for weed. Patty was told she could be arrested for showing up at her own property wanting to get inside. Does this shock you?
Yes.
Well, let me tell you, two people on that show from here in DFW, the Sicilian brothers, that have spent $250,000 trying to get a squatter out of one of their properties.
Jeez.
Wow.
$250,000. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, yeah, I'd get them out of there. But you got to be careful because you go by, you can wind up getting arrested, getting people out of your own house.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
That's right. Well, we know now the state of Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis is taking some measures to try and put protections in place to change the laws.
Yeah, well, Patty was working with the legislators in Florida to get that done. And so it's But I mean, that's why I love doing this. We're doing the kind of shows that are affecting people. You need to be aware of this.
Yes, yeah.
All right, next, Americans have no idea that there is a powerful foreign entity infiltrating nearly every aspect of American life. Now, this one is scary. I'm talking about the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party, which are threatening everything we hold dear. Now, we did a deep dive and were shocked by what we found. America is quietly being attacked on multiple fronts by the Chinese government.
They're really savvy about how they moved into this country and infiltrated the agriculture sector.
How did you find out you were on the most wanted list in China?
I woke up the next morning, found myself a wanted fugitive.
My own sister was taken away. She's in dark dungeon somewhere.
We want to be clear about that. It's not the Chinese people. It's certainly not Asian people. It's the government. Lyndsay, this one really hit you hard.
Yeah, it actually does. I was so glad that you did this segment. And if you haven't watched it, you need to go watch it. I actually spent quite a bit of time in China teaching English. And I think something that you say in this episode is so critical. It's not the Chinese people, it's the government. I grew up as a military brat and got to travel all over the world because of that and love this country because of that. But going to China was the first time I was actually truly culture shocked to see what a communist regime looks like. And the people are oppressed. And now we're seeing that come to America. And this is, it is surprising to many people, but it's something that you clearly point out, that our top intelligence officials have been warning about this for quite some time and raising the red flag. And it's almost that the American people are numb to it when you have people on your episode saying that 80% of America's personal data has been stolen, yet people are on TikTok, and obviously something might be done about that now that there's a law in place for ByteDance to divest and sell it. But I think a lot of people are naive to think, well, what does it matter if China has my information? But when you talk about that they're buying up land in America, and it's not just that they're buying it, it's where they're buying it. This is very strategic.
That Virginia farmer, John, it was really interesting. Some of the land that he now owns, his father had as a sharecropper, and they've held that land generation after generation after generation. And what's happened now is the Chinese have come in and bought all the land around him, and they paid such inflated prices for it that now his land is appraised at such a high value that he doesn't have the money to pay the taxes on it. So this land that they've had for hundreds of years, he's saying he may lose it because the Chinese has driven the tax base up so high that he doesn't believe he can pay the taxes on it. And so I created this map, which you'll see when you download Merit Plus and watch the episode, is we look to see where they're buying land. And what I did is I said, all right, I'm gonna color all the areas red that they're buying land. And then I put the military installations in America on the map. And lo and behold, all this land they're buying is wrapped around our military installations. And then you say, well, what's happening at these military installations? It's really high value, top secret stuff. And one of them has a wind farm, but they don't have any propellers on the wind farm. They've got cameras looking into the military. You can't go to China and buy land at all, certainly around their military installations. And between 2010 and 2020, they estimate about 1,100 Chinese came across the border.
Yes.
In the first 11 months of 2023, the estimate is 31,000 have come across the border. A high percentage of them military aged. And nobody knows where they are. They just came into America and then poof, they're gone. Where are they? What are they doing?
It looks like a tactical operation, and it looks as though they're coming in and setting up for something in the future. It's like they're stealing our intellectual property in plain sight, and it feels like, Dr. Phil, we're letting this happen.
Well, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist and go like, ooh. But the fact is, they're pouring into the border, and the Chinese citizens can't just say, think I'll take a vacation, and they got to go through a lot of stuff to get out of there, right? And it's a lot of money to get here.
A lot of stuff. And actually, so I taught at an intensive language training center, and the whole goal for these students who were college age or grad students, they wanted to learn conversational English. They knew written English very well so that they could get a pass to get out of China, because it's so difficult to do. But you know, one of the other fascinating things about that, I don't think people understand what an oppressive government looks like. And I would have these debates with my students, and I asked them to talk about Tiananmen Square. And they came back and they had this grandiose vision of what happened. They didn't really know. And so I did a search. You cannot search in China the truth about what happened in Tiananmen Square. It's blocked. They have so much propaganda for their own people, and Fanchon talks about it being a war of information, but that's really what you talk about. They are infiltrating our system in every way they can. Our infrastructure, our personal information, through our border, and they're, you know, I think there's just a misunderstanding from American people how a communist party, a communist country operates, and this is a war of information at the end of the day.
Yeah. All right, next. Parents who said despite both of them working full-time as teachers, they could barely afford the basic necessities to survive as a family. It's a problem so many hardworking Americans are facing.
And we're still living on the poverty borderline.
61% of the people in America say they're living paycheck to paycheck.
Our daughter doesn't even have health care.
I just never thought I would be living this life.
We're paying people not to work. These guys are working 4 jobs, making $1,000 more than these people who aren't working at all.
It's honestly a slap in the face.
Is it just me, or is the system turned on its head? Dominique, you're worried about the emotional fallout from people that are struggling in this way because they're working so hard and they can't keep their head above water.
Sure, and it's what's fascinating to me is we listen to all of your different shows and how they've connected to each one of us. This one resonated with me. That's why you have to have the Merit Plus app, so that you have that connection to a show. It's so important. So as I watched this, I saw this playing out later in life. Kris had the opportunity to know my mother, who passed away last year at the age of 87. And she was blessed to make it all the way to 87. But oftentimes you don't realize how long you're going to live, and you're not teed up for that kind of financial cushion to be able to support you, to be able to plan for all of that. So the fallout from what I'm seeing from your show is that yes, the struggle is now. It's paycheck to paycheck now. But if it doesn't get remedied and if there isn't a plan, what happens is the burden then falls on the children and the surrounding family. So the fallout becomes even greater than the couple or the individual who's trying to make ends meet with 1, 2, and sometimes 3 jobs. The old days of retiring at 65 and being able to sail off into the sunset, that's like an American dream from yesteryear. And that's what's so disheartening to me.
Yeah, and it was interesting to hear, we had this couple on that were both teachers, and they were both working extra jobs. It was really heartbreaking because they were saying their children would come in and say, oh, it's time for like cheerleader tryouts, and so I need these tights and these tennis shoes because I really want to try out. And they had to say, no, can't, you know, sorry. And it's not like they're looking for a handout. They're doing everything they can. They're working around the clock. And we even looked at their finances. It's not like they've got spending a bunch of frivolous money or, I mean, they're just doing bare essentials to try to get by and can't do it. And when that's the case, something's wrong.
Sure.
They got college educations, they're hardworking, they're putting in the time, they're living in modest fashion and can't get there. Something's wrong. We've got to turn things around in some way. And we undervalue and underpay teachers terribly. That's one thing. It's hard for me to even look teachers in the eye. We turn our most valuable assets over to them, our children. They're with them 40% of their waking hours. I don't know a single teacher that doesn't get in their own pocket to get resources for their classroom.
Yep.
I'm the daughter of 2 educators. They always take money out of our family money in order to make sure their students had what they needed. I watched my dad take his students to plays and classes because he wanted them to be exposed to great things, to be able to dream. But my parents did that with their resources. So it's a tragedy that that happens to our educators.
And people at 65, you even featured a woman at 75 who had to get back into the workforce at a time when you mentally think and believe this is your time to downshift. And a lot of people faced health problems at that age. And now you're having to endure the stress of a job that you probably don't like at a time where you don't want to do it.
And she was caught in the middle because she was saying, I'm working 24 hours a week. And that's really all my body can handle. Plus, if I work any more, then they start cutting back my Social Security. And if I work any less, I can't survive. It's just wrong. I mean, it's just wrong. You know, I went from shooting an hour a day, 5 days a week, to a network that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. People have asked me, is there a difference? Nah. It's kind of like falling backwards down a hill. But it's a fun trip. We're really having a ball. And I'm so thankful for everyone that's been supporting us and watching us. We're talking about things that matter to people who care. And that makes it all worthwhile.
So speaking of, you had a #1 daytime talk show for 21 seasons, I think it was. Why would you decide to walk away from that, start all over here in a brand new network with a primetime nighttime show?
Well, I've wondered that. No, I really haven't had any buyer's remorse at all. I wanted to do some different things. And I wanted wider guardrails in terms of what I could talk about and not talk about. And I wanted a bigger platform. CBS has been a great partner, and we're still partners. You know, I have primetime shows there, and I do different things with them, and I have nothing negative to say about CBS at all. We've been great partners, and we were the longest running show in the history of Paramount. That's a 105-year-old lot, and we were the longest running show. And the second longest running show was our son's show, The Doctors. They were on for 14 years. But, you know, I've seen things change across time. You know, when we started Dr. Phil in 2002, it was a very different world. The first text message hadn't even been sent. Think about that. There were no smartphones. The internet was just kind of something people used in business. It wasn't prolific. And then everything changed. And so I had to change with it. And in these last few years, social issues became really prominent because a lot of people were pushing some really, what I think are unhealthy narratives. In this cancel culture, people were afraid to talk about those things. It's been said that I would rather have questions I can't answer than answers I can't question. And right now, we're in an era where you can't even question answers people are giving you, or you're labeled a hater or some kind of phobic or something. And that's just not right. We need to have open discussion, open debate. And I wanted to do that here. I wanted to do it on our news. I wanted to do it on this platform. I wanted to do it across this whole network. And I wanted to have a place where kind of core values were embraced again. You can't just decide you're going to rewrite history, biology, science, and just throw everything else out. I wanted to talk about core values and have a family-friendly network, and that's what I wanted to do, so that's what I did. When we come back, Fanchon has a really interesting question, but I don't know what it is. We'll be right back. Well, we're back. We've been talking about our first 2 months on the air, and as we finish up, you had a question.
Yes, I did. Myself, Dominique, we've been in the news business, myself, 30 years this year. And it has been quite a journey watching what has happened to the industry, not just news, but our media in general, the topics, like you mentioned, that are not being discussed fully. In your book, you really expose some of the things, the underlying things behind some of the issues we have. When someone watches Merit Street Media, because to me, to all of us, this is a breath of fresh air. There are so many of us that were holding the flag, trying to make sure that the level of integrity and truth and unbiased coverage was center, and it wasn't in the center a lot of times. So when someone watches Merit Street Media, what do you want them to know about the principles behind this and the core foundational principle of meritocracy?
Well, I had to come up with a name for this network. And you don't think about that because mostly people just refer to stuff with letters, NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN. And I named this network Merit Street Media. And that wasn't randomly chosen. Merit, merit, merit. We got a lot of people out there right now pushing this agenda that we're supposed to be striving for equality of outcome. No matter what happens, we're all supposed to come out the same. That's been tried.
Hasn't worked.
Well, it works until you run out of other people's money.
That's right. That's right.
And then it doesn't work. It's been called socialism, Marxism, a lot of different things. But this country, I believe, was built on hard work, added value, talent, and I think we're preparing children and college kids the wrong way. I think they're not going to be prepared for competition in the real world. I was on the UCLA campus when they came in and took down the pro-Palestinian encampment that had the whole campus frozen. It was insane. They canceled the USC graduation where 85,000 people show up. Those are the same kids who had their high school graduation canceled because of COVID. What are we doing? What are we thinking about? We let these radicals come in and take over a campus because they hate Jews? And we're allowing that to happen? What's wrong with us? That's not okay. And nobody's talking about that honestly.
That's right.
We have to have honest, open dialogue. So when people say, what are they doing over at Merit Street Media? We're telling the truth.
Thank you.
We're just talking about common sense. You do have a right to free speech, but I talked to two groups of Jewish kids on the UCLA campus, and I said, do you guys believe in free speech? They said, yes, they don't have to like us, but they don't have the right to form human chains around us and shove us down in the dirt and tell us they want to kill us. That's not free speech. That's not protected under the Constitution. And people won't call that out. The media won't call it out. Right. Everybody says that Hollywood is run by these Jewish power brokers. Why aren't they speaking out? The truth needs a platform, and that's what I want to talk about here. And I'll let people come on both sides if they treat one another with dignity and respect. And I want to talk about these things. And they'll label me whatever they want to label me. That's fine. I don't care. I'm going to keep showing up, and I'm going to keep coming, and I hope you guys will keep showing up and coming.
Yes.
Because we need to talk about the truth. I have a respect for science and empirical data, and I'm not afraid to say that I am a man of faith, and I believe in scientific realities, and I'm just going to talk common sense, reality, and truth, and I think that's what we need. Yes. And I think we need to recognize what got this country to be where it is. And is this country perfect? Of course it's not. But I love America.
Yes.
I love this country. I do. It's not perfect. We have things to work on, so let's work on them, but let's work on them together. I'm tired of people trying to win arguments instead of trying to solve problems. And we need to try to solve problems.
That's it. That's it.
And that's what I want to have happen. All right, we're out of time. I want to thank Loni, Kris, Lyndsay from our news on Merit Street, as well as Fanchon and Dominique. Thank you guys all for being here and talking about this. They do a great job on the news. We have a real interesting attitude about news. Our attitude is we're going to tell you what happened and then shut up about it. And let you decide if it's good news or bad news. We'll do a deep dive and really tell you why and what happened. No spin, just let you decide. I really want to thank all of you at home for finding us here on Merit TV. If you've missed any of the episodes we talked about, you can download Merit Plus app and watch them there. And you can pick up my book, We've Got Issues, How You Can Stand Strong for America's Soul and Sanity, everywhere books are sold. But everybody in the audience, you're all going home with your own copy of We've Got Issues. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. So long.